And I reflected again that I have to go back to what I'm interested in. I remembered the 10-year-old in PNG, and I looked at courses, found the course that really best suited my interest area, which was at Imperial College, the Environmental Technology Masters in Science.
How old were you back then?
I was 30 or 31.
So let's highlight this.
Yeah.
You had a career and you felt like you were not doing enough, and then you still felt like you can go back.
Yeah.
Hi guys, I'm B and this is Seleha. Say hi.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Seleha.
I'm very happy to have you here, Seleha. And thank you so much for accepting. I was telling Seleha that I was hesitating recording this podcast today because of my voice. But you have a very beautiful voice, so I think this episode will be a bit of an ASMR type of vibe. As I told you, I was always super inspired by your story. You are born in Africa, but you are from Asia. You've worked everywhere around the world. I remember a particular story about you working with women in Afghanistan. You have an incredible career in the climate sphere, and you also have a passion for stories and for art. I think many other people will feel inspired to hear and learn from your life journey and for how you made decisions and from how you've seen your mission. So I wanted to have a conversation today, open, relaxed, about purpose across time, about how your perception of happiness changed, and about how it evolved with different stages in your life. So, how would you describe your career to our audience today?
First of all, thank you so much, Bianca, for doing this. It's prompted me to also reflect on career and where I'm going next. Yes, I was born in a country in Africa, and I have moved around to different countries. I have moved to places in the Pacific, in South Asia, North Asia, Europe, the United States. And I actually would describe myself as someone focused on engagement with communities for addressing climate change.
Tell me more about your career, how it started, what you studied, what attracted you to climate, and if you always knew that climate is what you wanted to do. Was it something that you've always dreamed of, or was it more of a series of coincidences leading you to where you are now?
I think with climate, I immediately got interested in it because I was in Papua New Guinea when I was 10, age I'd say 8 to 11. And at that time, the environment, the trees, the foliage, the flora and fauna were in your face in a sense. So if you planted one small thing, it would suddenly grow, and it was just all around us. And at that time, the Australian school system had environmental studies in it. And so I was immediately interested in this. I had 4 girlfriends there, 5 of us, did a short newsletter every 2 weeks about engaging the community on reducing, reusing, recycling to preserve the environment. So I got captured, my imagination got captured by being in this extreme tropical setting where there was quite unique flora and fauna. It's the place
Sounds
where
like a place where a scientist would be born, where you would be surrounded by jungle and then you see all this biodiversity at an eye away. You wake up and you see something beautifully colored and you're wondering, right, about their story and about maybe how you protect them. I want to understand how you made your choice about going to study. What did you study? And after that, what was your first job? Was climate a gradual realization or something that you pursued with intentions is forever?
soon after the Papua New Guinea
Yes.
experience, I was in Bhutan in the Himalayas. And that was when I was a young adult. So that was where I also observed that the government was focusing on gross national happiness and the environment and health. I wanted to study this area, and I went and did my undergrad on economics with development studies. And there was a blueprint for a green economy in that early 90s course.
That's amazing.
So again, I'm an 80s kid. I was born in the 70s, 80s kid, went to do economics for development studies, but the environmental component of studies and environmental studies wasn't something that was done by many people.
Right.
Either you did a law course or economics. So I just did the economics, but I did with development studies at Sussex.
Okay. What were you doing after that? That was a bachelor's. Did you work in parallel? How was your first job?
I worked in parallel, and one of the summers I got an internship with the Afghan rural support program in the northern areas of Pakistan, and that was to look at a commercial vegetable package for women and to assess what the impact was on the women and whether that program was going well. One of the things we found out is because of cultural issues, the truck drivers would not stop for the produce that the women were making.
Wow.
For them to be able to sell their produce. So we realized there was a gap in the program. We had given the seeds for them to grow it, and there was this need, which is the result of my study of these 12 villages. And that was during university. And then immediately after, I also wanted to work in development. So I went to Pakistan and looked for work, and I found a job as a program officer for Save the Children USA. And there we worked only focused on Afghan refugees in Pakistan. And we also did focus on doing programs and training trainers for our staff who were working in Afghanistan,
Right.
but from Pakistan. So we worked on group guaranteed lending schemes for women, non-formal education for women, the two main programs. And another one, which was really meaningful, was landmine education for children, because landmines were spread all over Kabul. And we used board games with the Scandinavian colleagues I had to get the message across to children to what to watch out for, what did landmines look like. Because some
That's
of them
incredible.
like toys.
Yeah.
That was a very sad thing.
So this is already when you start to become a young adult, right? You finish your studies, you start to have an understanding of where you want to take your career. What was purpose for you back then? What was motivation? And how did it change? What was the first impact of real life world on your ideals as a student?
At this point, again, that was a full-time job. Save the Children. Afghan Rural Support
Yeah.
Program was not. I think that your question was also, why am I getting into this climate? How did I get into this climate space? Actually, I came from this development focus, and one of the main things I realized is that these first jobs I had in my early 20s were the ones that I actually felt the greatest job satisfaction from, because of the immediate feedback from the women in the
Right.
community saying, we've not actually been asked in this way what we would like to put, what our programs should look like and what we should focus on. So I'd done this, what's called a participatory approach. It was something I'd learned at university, and I applied it on the ground for Save the Children USA and also for Afghan Rural Support Program.
I was about to ask you, Seleha, if you remember one moment in these initial experiences which you found defining, something of an interaction with one of the women that you work with, or a day that you particularly remember that just stayed with you in life. Do you remember anything? Do you have anything like that?
I remember the break time when we did the strategic planning approach with Afghan refugees in Baluchistan, and a woman during the break on the balcony came over and said, basically was extremely grateful, saying again this point about, you have listened to us and you are and therefore what we now know you're doing in our strategic planning, which she said no one had engaged in that way, nor included them in plans for the next 3 years. So we had put this strategic planning exercise forward so that they would identify their vision, their objectives, and what activities they would have in the community. Some of them couldn't read or write, so we had a particular way of engaging them to articulate it. So that's something at the break time. She went over knowing that she could see that I'm originally from Pakistan. She said she hasn't seen someone like me coming to work on this type of activity for Afghan refugees in this way.
Right. And I imagine maybe being part of that work, did that activate a bit more of your Pakistani identity too? Did that trigger a bit more of this inclination to investigate more of your Pakistani identity?
I think that me going back after university in the UK and then being in different countries and then choosing to go back, I did want to explore what it would be like to be in Pakistan and live there.
Right.
I think that in terms of identity, I define it in somewhat a different way. And I talk about it in terms of it being a facet of myself, not that I am one identity or another. So it's one of the layers of identity, and I'm quite international in that respect.
Right, you are.
So,
As we know, even the story of your parents.
But certainly, yes, there's this understanding component. At the same time, I definitely do not feel fully Pakistani at all.
Yeah.
I feel that I have a different perspective, even on culture. And I did make an effort to go back, and also my family have been interested in classical music and art and the history of Pakistan. So I have cousins who've written about pre-Islamic history, about Buddhism and about the first civilizations in Pakistan. So it was good to go back and then to go on weekends on trips to the lakes nearby and even to Taxila, where you see the starving Buddha, and the fact that Buddhism was both in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And they were the seat of Buddhism. Buddhism then went east from there.
Maybe we will park this idea because it's interesting. We already see this facet of yours, the art side, right? Art, and especially coming from an area in the world known for its beautiful artifacts and from the cultural influences that it spread across the world. Let's go back to your initial stages of your career where you find yourself very satisfied and you find like you have a purposeful career with an impact on the community. What changed at the point when you moved from that to an office, or what was the next level? What did you do after these initial experiences?
So this initial experience, I need to share this with you all as well. One thing is that when I was working in Pakistan and for Afghan refugees and doing this work in the northern areas of Pakistan, I, at that time as a young person, thought that I'm not bringing an immediate benefit to the community. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not immediately alleviating issues of some, many children were getting sick from certain things or in those poor communities, or there was really real challenges for healthcare. Hi. So
I know.
We're in an interview. Do we need to cut that?
No, don't worry. I'll edit out.
Yeah, so
That's fine. Yeah.
That's my colleague from the economics
That's the expat community in Beijing,
okay.
Everyone.
So what I wanted to say is that
You had the impression that your work was not contributing more directly in a traditional sense.
Yeah, and that's why this
contribution.
woman who came and said this on the balcony, I realized what I was bringing was my one thing, which is organizing, structuring, and putting together a plan that would then be funded by funders from the region. So that 3-year report was going to the regional discussion on where funding would be allocated.
Yes.
So going back to your question.
What happened? You find yourself having all these questions. Maybe I'm not doing enough. So what did you do? How did you react? Did you have a long moment of self-questioning? Or
Yeah. So what happened is that I then thought, okay, I've got to go, and I've been in the development sector. I'm not a doctor. And at that time, I didn't value as much that feedback that I got that I think about right now.
Right.
So for young people, remember what you're doing. You can actually have quite a big impact as a person in your early 20s, which you may not realize until you're later. And I think specifically women,
We'll stop here and
because it's
redefine what.
raining.
Hi guys, we had to move in because it started raining, and I think it's just normal to have this type of weather changes as we're talking with a climate specialist, right? So, Seleha, we're back. It's warm inside. We are a bit protected by the climate change outside and the pollution, but not for too long. We were talking about your career and your first mini existential crisis. You find yourself that the career which gave you purpose so far back then is not necessarily answering to all your questions. What happened?
I realized that I need to see what it would be like to also work in the private sector, because I'd been in development and then working for NGOs. As I mentioned earlier, that I was having this questioning of myself because I thought, what real value am I bringing? I'm not a doctor. And it's only many years later that I realized I was bringing value. So I wanted to see what it would be like to work in a different sector. Also, though, try to still have that purpose, which is to try to improve the situation for people, communities, and developing countries in the private sector.
So, what did you do and what was this activity? How different was it from what you originally did? And what taught you the private sector? How long could a development person survive in the private sector?
I survived from 98 till 2007. So, what I did is immediately after the development work in Pakistan, I got a short stint in an investment bank in the region, so in Bangladesh, and I worked on a syndicated loan. It was in an industry. It was for rolled steel.
Beautiful.
So not exactly what I was, the type of sector I wanted to be
No,
in.
but I think it's very important, and I want us to understand what you realize doing that, because sometimes, we make decisions based on different things. You needed something more. Sometimes people choose careers for various reasons. You go from passion to pursuing money, or to pursuing stability, or to pursuing some kind of new challenge. So I'm very curious to understand how was that experience and what did it taught you, and how it later reflected into your approach to back to climate work, because you basically went to work for the bad guys who are actually very essential parts of modern human society.
So that particular experience, because it's this particular skill set that I wanted to understand. The financial world has what's called financial analysis, and you do information memorandums, and you're doing these basic core financial analysis. And I think that helped me to realize that it was good basis, and I think that was my purpose to understand this, because later on I realized that you can include climate risks and other aspects which are the reality into the financial analysis. It's just we have set up our global system to not include those aspects when we already knew about this in the 1980s. Climate data has been out there and it's not something new. So I did that just for a short stint, and then I went to Europe, where it was a combination of being back with my friends from university, because
Right.
I was still in my 20s. And then I also worked in emerging markets investment for a
Right.
research company, a new one. I think it was a combination of the job that I was able to get when I applied. I didn't
Right.
have a massive set of experience behind me. I got this World Markets Research Center job. It was a relatively new company, and they wanted to move their print-based emerging markets investment and industry portals online. And we
Right.
were in the 90s.
Must be very interesting.
Yeah, and we got this onto the stock exchange. once we got all their industry publications online. And so I did both emerging markets investment, worked, and I, even though was in the private...
Seleha.
Thank you.
Seleha.
This is not matcha latte.
Matcha.
燕麦奶，
燕麦奶的 matcha.
燕麦奶拿铁，
Matcha latte.
燕麦奶拿铁。
Oh,
So,
moving things online.
oh yes. So this was the time when things were being put online, and this was World Markets Online Analysis, daily analysis. I did that daily analysis. It gave me a good global picture because we did this for investors, to know what's happening in developing countries. And
Right.
I mean, it was crazy in a sense.
Well,
oh,
it
it's snowing.
snows.
Oh my gosh. That is, I was not expecting that.
People, we started the day, it was like 8 degrees. It rained and now it's snowing.
This is very interesting.
Saleha, this is exactly why we're having this summer. Like, people go join climate careers. We need you. Get out of the industrial steel and digital. It's crazy. I'm just
at
going
the
to show
same-
this. I'm sorry.
About moving to this frame.
Yeah, it stopped. Because, of course, it just comes and go, you know? Great.
And so, yeah, emerging markets, we were advising people on investment on a daily basis. And then we focused on particular industry, which was we did telecoms first and then the automotive industry.
You did so much. But still, what I know you for is this involvement in very high level climate work.
Later.
How late are we talking about?
So when I was doing this automotive work, I was going to car shows, Geneva Motor Show I went to.
Nice.
And I was very much in this space. I was trying to then do work on alternative fuels. But at that time, the car companies and this analytical firm that I worked for was not really focused on the environment or alternative fuels or electric vehicles. And I reflected again. It was another second point of reflection, that I have to go back to what I'm interested in. And I remembered the 10-year-old in PNG, and I looked at courses. And I found the course that really best suited my interest area, which was at Imperial College, the Environmental Technology Masters in Science.
How old were you back then?
I was 30 or 31.
So let's highlight this.
Yeah.
You had a career and you felt like you were not doing enough, and then you still felt like you can go back
Yes.
and do something. And then you design a plan which was going back to school.